For all of you who are just joining us, we're going to give it about 2 more minutes and then get kicked off. Thanks for your patience, and we are psyched to have you here. All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm joined by Inbar. I'll let her introduce herself in just a few seconds, but we're really excited to have you guys here today to talk content creation and distribution. If you are in the YouTube viewer, you'll see a chat pane to your right. We encourage you to ask questions as we go along, make this very participatory. We'll try and answer the questions as they come, but we'll likely save most of them for a Q&A session at the end. What we'll do is send out the slides after the fact to you guys. So no worries about taking notes, just enjoy the presentation and feel free to comment as we go. Most of all, I'm excited to be joined by Inbar, who comes from Taboola today, who is a queen of all things content. It's safe to say that, I think. Her introduce herself. Cool. So let me pop up. I'll show you just quickly what the agenda we have here for today is. Let me just get the screen up for you guys. Hold on one second. There we go. Okay. Technical difficulties. Inbar, do you want to throw it up for me real quick?
Sure, not a problem. Hold on just 1 second. I'll get that to you.
Thanks.
Technology is wonderful sometimes, isn't it? Just 1 minute. Sharing now. And let me tell me if you see it now, Juliana.
Oh, you're good to go. Thanks, Inbar.
Sure. So agenda. Here we go.
Cool. So I'll let you take you through it. What you'll see up there is we're going to just talk a little bit. Inbar is going to cover content creation. I'm going to head into content distribution. And then from there, we'll save about 10-15 minutes at the end for Q&A. To kick it off, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Juliana. I'm a marketing manager here at HubSpot. What I do is work with sales teams to enhance like the full funnel that they work on. So everything from content creation to distribution, all the way down to sales enablement. I look at the funnel and I work with other stakeholders here at HubSpot to say, how can we make this more efficient? Prior to my job at HubSpot, I worked at a social advertising software platform company doing content strategy for large brands on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and then moved over to a marketing role there where I was doing a similar type thing with content distribution. So I'll pass it over to Inbar.
So hi everyone, and thanks again, Juliana, for making all of this happen. My name is Inbar. I am actually based out of Tel Aviv, so anybody who sees me on video is actually seeing my living room right now. I head up the creative strategy team at Taboola. And what we do is we find trends and best practices, and we help our clients, who are mostly advertisers, marketers, find success on the network through creative optimization, A/B testing, and that kind of thing. So I work with everybody from brand advertisers, performance marketers, to, of course, B2B marketers. If you haven't heard of Taboola, just really quick, we are the world's largest content discovery platform. We serve content recommendations across premium sites like USA Today, NBC, and we see something like 1 billion unique visitors a month. And so I have the privilege of really getting a bird's eye view of what it is to really create content for a really broad audience. And I think, if we're starting to dig into content creation and what I've learned in terms of B2B marketing, the biggest challenge, and I think this isn't news to anybody, is that there's a lot of clutter. There's a lot of white noise, and we're living in such a fragmented landscape that it's just really hard to get people's attention. And I think that one of the biggest things that I see happen often is people tend to say, okay, well, we're trying to compete for attention. Let's go as broad as humanly possible in order to really to reach as many people as we can. And the truth is that that's not necessarily the best way to go. Broader is not better, especially when you're catering to a niche audience. Especially in the B2B space. I'm a big fan and a big proponent of specificity. What it means really is that you can get a quality, qualified user to read your content, and the scale can come from a really well-built distribution strategy, which I know Juliana is going to talk about at length later. But really what it is, we get so tempted to imitate. We say, okay, well, this is working for company X. Let's try it ourselves. And the truth is that's not always the best way to go. And usually it's not the best way to go. The marketers who I see do best, both in B2B and in actually any category, are the ones who are the innovators, are the ones who are first out of the gate. And so when I talk to B2B marketers, the first thing I really encourage them is to be innovative and to really speak to what they do as a company, and not try to just do the same thing everybody else is doing. And the way I kind of like to look at it is what I call a funnel first approach to content. There's people talk a lot about personas. I know Juliana's going to touch on that a little bit.
Sure.
There's a lot of different ways to look at content strategy, and I'm a big proponent, especially when you're looking at niche audiences like B2B, to look at it funnel first. What that means is, rather than forcing goals onto content, create content with the goal already in mind. Oftentimes, it's not to say that you can't repurpose. I know that, anybody who runs a content organization needs to have repurposing in their toolbox. But at the end of the day, you can't you can't just throw a bunch of pasta at the fridge and see what sticks. Taking a funnel first approach, thinking about the goal that you want to achieve, will really help you going forward. And let me explain why. Oftentimes, something that I see happen a lot in content marketing is measurement becomes a really huge challenge, right? And part of the problem is, if you're throwing multiple KPIs at every content piece, it really does become hard to define success. And what I see is, if you create something with a specific goal in mind, success is not only easily defined, it's then really easily replicated. It really helps going forward if you create something with a specific goal and you achieve that goal. Say, okay, well, what worked about that? Let's try to do it again. If you try to do too many things at once, what ends up happening is you really sometimes tend to lose the plot. And so I'm a big believer in reverse engineering a content strategy based on needs and your own KPIs. And I think that, and this is really what I found, if you're engaging and transparent about what you want, users will tend to stick around. They like honesty. They see through anything that just asks too much of them. So if you just are very straightforward about how you approach them, it tends to work in marketers' favor. So let me kind of explain a little bit about what I mean by funnel first approach, right? As marketers, we like targeting a lot. I'm sure most of you are familiar with third-party data segments and lookalike audiences and LinkedIn targeting and everything that you get through other social channels as well, Facebook, etc. And the truth is that I think that Technology and data are wonderful things. You know, I work at an ad tech company. Obviously, technology powers us. But the beautiful thing about content is it allows you to go beyond that. So this is kind of a simplified example, but if you stick to just whatever you decide your target audience is, rather than your value proposition, then you can miss out on people. So for example, if you're a small web design firm, yes, your primary customer base is probably small business owners, and I'm sure that if you mark off small business owners, you'll reach the right people, but you're only reaching small business owners. What about that small percentage of people, of other people who have a website who want to make it look good, right? It might not be a huge segment. It might be a 10% increase or 5% increase in the audience that you're reaching, but that can make a huge difference at scale. And so using your content to really just put your value proposition out into the world and really, like I said, take a funnel first approach can really help you discover new audiences. So let me kind of explain how I like to go about this idea of a funnel first content. So basically, when you go in and approach, you want to create a content piece, I say ask yourself 4 basic questions. What is the action you want the user to take? Do you want them to leave an email address, sign up for a demo? Do you want them to give their credit card information? Do you just want them to engage with you and click on another article? That's just as legitimate a KPI as anything else. So take that, and then who's the user you would like to take that action? You can get specific there. You can say, well, I want this kind of decision maker, or this kind of person. And then you have to think, what kind of content would be relevant to that user? And what reward can you give the user in exchange for that action? So let me give you just an example, right? Let's say you're a sign printing company and you specialize in storefront signs. So the person that you really would want is anybody who's looking for a storefront sign for brick and mortar stores. So what is relevant to that person? Well, what's relevant to that person and what they will opt in and click on that's relevant to you as well is, let's say, 4 great tips for the perfect storefront sign. I know it's obvious, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, but that's a really great way to attract people who are absolutely relevant. People will click on it who are interested in this exact thing. They will opt into your message by clicking, and it becomes a very powerful tool to just bring the right people in to engage with your brand. So okay, you created this great article for amazing elements of a great storefront sign. What's next? Well, you want that user, let's say, to leave an email address. So you can start, lead nurture and eventually get them into your print shop. So maybe suggest at the end of the article, hey, so we just gave you all this information about storefront signs. If you're looking to create a new one, we're the experts. So if you give us your email address, we'll give you an in-store discount next time you come in. Right? I know it seems very basic, but you would be absolutely blown away by the effect of this. And so I'm going to actually tell you a story. This is a B2C story, but I think it really brings the point home. And I think it's relevant to everybody. So we had an online dating site that was running with Taboola, and they were running with this piece, 10 tips to impress on a first date. That's an engaging piece. It was getting really good CTR, getting good volume, attracting a really big audience. But they were coming in at way above their cost per acquisition goal. They were looking very clearly to sign people up to their online dating service, and they weren't even close to getting anybody to do it within their CPA goals. So I get on the line with this client, and I said, well, okay, think about it this way. Who clicks on 10 tips to impress on a first date can get dates? Right? Nobody, if a person can't get dates, they probably won't click on it. People who have dates want to figure out how to impress, right? I've gotten a date, now how do I make a good impression? And so the client said, okay, so what should I write instead? I said, well, how about 10 reasons to try online dating? They ended up writing 8 reasons just because they couldn't come up with 10 good ones. But basically, the client, when I suggested this, he literally laughed at my face, because it's this kind of bang your head against the wall obvious thing. And as marketers, we don't like being obvious, right? We want to make things complicated. We want to make things pretty. And sometimes we shy away from being this straightforward. He went along with me and decided to do it. And what ended up happening is literally the day they published it, before they did any sort of optimization, anything beyond just, you know, putting it out into the world, their CPA decreased. It became something like 1/12 of what they were getting with 10 tips to impress on a first date. Right? It's just amazing how powerful just being relevant is. So if you think about this, let's break it down, right? 8 reasons to try online dating. Who would click on that? Well, a person who's probably already considering trying an online dating site. So all you need to do, the only work you need to do, take the person from consideration to decision. It's really that simple. Targeting a person in a specific phase of a decision is not a bad thing. It may seem like it will limit you, but there are ways to achieve scale. You can find incredible success with this kind of, as I said, funnel first strategy. So that being said, I wanted to talk a little bit because, you know, I have a bit of a bird's eye view here. I want to go over just a couple of tips and tricks. Let's say you've got the perfect content piece now. How do you get a person to actually take action and engage with your piece? And I find that the page makes a lot of difference. Anybody who's been in marketing for, you know, a day knows this. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about things that we find really work well. So there's a list. I'm going to bring some examples here. But the first thing is, I think, really important. Focus on a single KPI per page. I think, you know, I kind of mentioned this in terms of creating a content that fits your goal and not, you know, forcing goals onto content. This is the biggest mistake. I call it KPI palooza. And I see marketers making it all the time, right? You write an article, then you're like, okay, well, follow us on LinkedIn and tweet about us. And while you're at it, sign up for a news. And if you want a free demo, fill out the form below, right? And what ends up happening is there's so much white noise that there's no way for the user to actually really understand what you want them to do. And so a single focused call to action that talks about one specific thing is going to probably make it content piece most effective. Making things readable. So this is a bit of a cautionary tale, right? Like I said, marketers really like to be pretty and complicated, and sometimes that can really work against them. So we've run endless A/B tests on this. I've been at Taboola for 4 years. I see this all the time. Black on white, clean pages with bolded subheaders and a big font work best always. There's a lot of things that are becoming fashionable now, like these segmented pages with strips of color. People are really liking putting gray fonts on gray backgrounds. Every single A/B test I've ever run has made black on white the winner. And I think it's because we're hard-coded to read black on white, right? That's print. And so it makes things, yes, it makes things simpler, but that actually makes it more inviting to the users. Like I said, there's a lot of clutter out there, and you want to make sure people stick around. Let's talk a little bit about calls to action, because we said, you know, you want to focus on a single KPI. You also want to make sure people see your call to action. So something that works really effectively is text and a button. Now, that might be obvious, but really an organic continuation of your content is what's important here. Put your value proposition out there, tell them why you want them to do what you want them to do, and then give them a really simple, straightforward button to click on. There's a reason you see it everywhere, and it's because it works. Another thing that we see working really well is integrated form fields. If you only want an email address, don't make them click on a button, right? Integrate it organically into the page. Just have them click on submit, and that's going to be easier. You know, users are lazy. Think about your own browsing habits. You don't want to work too hard, right? And so the more accessible it is, the easier it is. And so if you don't have a form that's, you know, 10 miles long and all you really want is an email address, then just put it right there in the article. A common CTA mistake that I see all the time, and this is really prevalent with B2B marketers, is putting the CTA on the right rail. This obviously for desktop. This is very different for mobile, and we'll talk about mobile in a second. But if you rely on the right rail on desktop, people aren't going to look at it, right? You're creating content and you want people to engage with your content, and people just don't look at the right rail very often. I know I don't, right? I'm looking at an article, I'm reading the article. I very rarely look to the side, and it's kind of a factor of banner blindness. And so relying only on the right rail as a placement really is missing the point. And we see often that just a simple thing like moving your form from the right rail to the bottom of the page can make all the difference in the world. Another really common mistake, calls to action that look like banners. Even text on like big blocks of color. Let's say your article is black on white, right? Black font on a white background, and your call to action is on a big red rectangle. People are going to read it as a banner, and they're just going to skim right over it. Attention spans are so limited, and banner blindness has been a thing for a very long time. And it's the same exact thing anywhere. And so oftentimes we see a simple thing like swapping out a banner call to action with just plain text. It does really well. So the next thing, and I can't really emphasize this enough, I'm seeing this over and over and over again. If you're going to ask for a lot of information from a person, or you want them to take a complicated action, gamify it. Especially, I mean, we're seeing this especially effective on mobile. And you shouldn't be ignoring mobile as a platform by any means. Making something interactive is an incredibly valuable and effective tool. So we actually did a study on this, and we tried to separate landing pages, just content pieces, and email capture with things that have some sort of quiz onboarding funnel. Even if it's just separate screens for each form field, I'll show you some examples in a second. We just did a study of conversion rates. And so the effect was dramatic. As you can see, it's 300 times, about 3x in terms of conversion rates when you've got something that's slightly gamified. And that's a huge difference, right? I'm not saying every single time that's what's gonna happen in terms of your results, but it's definitely gonna help you with conversion rates. And especially, you know, we tend in the B2B space to have a whole lot of form fields. And gamification of those really can work. So here's an example of something that feels like a whole lot of form fields, right? Rather than asking for everything in one big page, this client just split it up into small little screens and then asked for information at the end. And that seemed to work really well. Another way is a questionnaire, right? What do you do? How do you do it? And then once a person is already engaged and they've already put the work in, quote unquote, at the end of it, just putting in an email address or putting in some personal information, or maybe even sometimes a credit card, that it becomes a much easier, much more organic thing. Because they say, okay, well, I've already put so much effort into this already, I might as well just continue, right? And by the way, this is also a good way of kind of a reward situation. What do I get in exchange? Well, you'll get a result. You'll get an answer. Giving your email in exchange for a quiz result is incredibly effective. We see it all the time. A couple of other things that you want to keep in mind when you're creating content, from my experiences, is one thing, and I think it's ignored very often, is cooking your users. It's sometimes, I mean, really, it's such an effective tool, and not enough marketers, I think, use it. And let me explain. If somebody has come to your site for the first time or even for the second time, it's not necessarily you know, the truth. Even if they like what you have to say, even if they've engaged with your content, they're not necessarily going to remember to come back, right? Again, fragmented landscape. If you cookie them and kind of follow them around, it's okay. It's okay to do it. They will come back, and they'll be reminded. It doesn't need to be aggressive. It doesn't need to be salesy. Just reminding them that you're there is often a really good tactic. And we see conversion rates go really skyrocket with anybody who does any sort of remarketing, retargeting campaign. Giving users something in return, like I mentioned before, your email for a quiz result, your email address for an ebook. Ebook downloads, I know they're done a lot, but they're really effective for lead capture. I haven't seen that go out of style for years at this point. And then another thing, and I'll talk just a little bit more about this, is putting yourself in users' shoes. as marketers, we're so involved in our own brand that we kind of forget that not everybody knows as much as we do. I'm gonna bring this into pitfalls, because the biggest mistakes I see marketers make in B2B space, but really anywhere, is the user knows who they are and they don't tell the user why they should be converting. Right? They're just like, okay, well, for instance, I had a client they were doing CRM software, and they had this great blog post. It was exactly the right strategy. I wouldn't have moved an inch from it in terms of the content. And at the end of that, there's a big old call to action button, and it says, try a free demo. And they weren't converting a lick. And they were showing me that the CTR on the button was great, but nobody was signing up. And I realized, try a free demo for what? They never said what they do. They never said company X is a CRM, does CRM software for small business. Not once did they mention it, post-click or pre-click. And so, of course, nobody was converting. Once they added an elevator pitch, this is what we do, all of a sudden people started converting. Another one, and I'm gonna hand this over to Juliana soon. Just two things I want to touch on quickly. One is ignoring mobile. B2B marketers love desktop, and I know why, but you know, you absolutely, if you're ignoring mobile, then you're behind the curve. And like I said, try a quiz. It works. And then the other thing is newsletter signups as a KPI. And I know this is probably a sensitive issue for a lot of people. It's not that newsletter signups are bad, but I want you to think about your own internet browsing habits. If you come across a site, it doesn't matter how good it is. The first time you've come across it, if you get a pop-up for a newsletter signup, you're probably not likely to do it. It's not that people don't do it at all, but if I look at conversion rates for newsletter signups versus ebook downloads or discounts or free demos or anything that's more concrete, it's night and day. And it's just, if you think about it, people don't want to just fill up their inbox for nothing. They'll give you your email address if you give them something in return. And so just saying, hey, we'll measure for newsletter is probably not going to be really effective at any sort of scale, unless it's people who are really constantly returning to your content. So that's me. I'm gonna hand this off to Juliana on the distribution side.
Cool. Thank you so much, Inbar. I think you got us to a really great place. I'm going to take over right now and throw us onto distribution. Cool. So there we are. Cool. Can you guys see the screen all right?
Yep, I can see it.
Perfect. So content distribution. I'll start it with the age-old question, which is, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? The answer is obviously no. And I think the similar question when we think about content distribution is, if a webinar is planned but no one sends an email out or posts on Facebook, does anyone attend? And again, the answer is obviously no. So you can create the best content in the world, and with Inbar's tips, you probably can do that even better now. But without the right help, it doesn't really get you anywhere. So distribution is important at all stages of the funnel, from attracting people to your site and building brand awareness, down to building sales pipeline and filling up demo requests. So we're going to talk about kind of the approach to distribution today, some of the places you want to consider, and how you really narrow in on that. But first, though, I want to talk about with distribution, as with anything else, when you consider expanding and diversifying your strategy, there's obviously some ups and downs. A lot of brands think, why would I look beyond the 3 channels I'm using now? Email works, social works. Especially they think that when you look at the risks of doing something like this. You could present an inconsistent brand voice. Think about having 14 different channels to monitor. That's 14 different tones. That's 14 different voices. That's 14 different product terminologies you have to monitor. It's hard enough to get 2 emails consistent. You also could waste resources, right? You only have so many hours a day. Why are you going to spend them all on channels that don't actually have a return for you? And last but not least, just frustrating prospects or customers. Imagine downloading an ebook in one place and then going to complain about it or ask a question about it on Twitter and having someone respond from the brand who has no clue what you're talking about. You can really kind of cause some friction there. I might be biased, but I do think that the rewards are greater though. First and most obviously, you can amplify your reach. More channels, larger audience, more chance for discovery. Simple as that. And then also creating more natural experiences for your audience. When you go to the channels that they are on or that they're more likely to interact with, they're more likely to engage with you. And then last but not least, just the more channels you try, the more you can figure out what works. You can test, you can optimize, and you can refine just by experimenting. Now, this is a little bit overwhelming of a slide, but it just goes to show that prioritizing where your brand lives is easier said than done. Take a look at the number of platforms that have come out over the past 20 years. We went from messages to movies, back to messages, to voice technology, and all the way up to watches now. So like, how is your brand supposed to keep up with this? Worst of all is that there's no safe bet when you go by platform, right? Like, raise all your hands out there in the ether. If you set up a company Google Plus page, okay, I'm gonna imagine that everyone's hands are up there. Keep them up if you've actually visited that page in the last 3 months to see how it's doing or to change anything on it. I'm assuming a lot of hands went down. This brings me to one of the main points that I want to make when we talk about content distribution today, is that we can't plan by the platform. We have to plan by the purpose. So you're going to see that thread as we go on today. And the way to start doing that is to build a framework that's more steady than platforms that come and go. So we're going to talk about content distribution methodologies today, really focusing in on the first half here, choosing your channels, refining it down by the audience that you are talking to, and then mapping out a plan. I'd love to go into all 6 steps, but we want to save some time for question and answer. So perhaps Inbar and I will team up for part 2 on that next time. Before we talk about choosing a channel, I know Inbar said this, but mobile is not a channel. Mobile is every channel. Mobile is everything you do at this point. And Inbar actually made a really good point about, especially with B2B marketers thinking this isn't relevant, but we actually have stats that tell us that 49% of B2B researchers who use their mobile devices for research do so at work. So everyone's on their phone nowadays. 2/3 of emails are read on smartphones nowadays. I think Google search takes place on mobile devices more than desktops in 10 countries in the world right now, including the United States. So mobile is not a channel. Mobile is everything. Through every piece of content you create, you want it to be optimized so that if you're distributing it anywhere, it'll still look good on mobile. All right, ready to dive in? We'll do choosing your channels. For this, I like to really start broad and then refine down by audience, refine down by planning. But like I said here, it really comes down to defining your purpose. Instead of thinking about individual channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, PPC ads, etc., think about what you want your users to do, just like Inbar said with content. If you want your users to engage with something or take an action, that's going to force your way through in one direction. If you want them to really engage with the content and stay on that channel, that's going to give you a whole different set of options. Think, for example, about the last place you read an article online. I'm willing to bet that if you were really engaged in that experience, there weren't 1,000 CTAs and pop-ups. It probably wasn't in your Twitter feed. It was probably on a platform that was simple, beautiful, aesthetically pleasing, and that kept your attention and made it easy to stay on that page. Likewise, think of the last action you took online. It was probably on social media or on a CTA or via an ad that you clicked on. So the channel really should be defined by the action or the purpose that you want to elicit. We'll talk about publishing a little bit first. And all of this to say is that publishing channels are where visitors consume the content. It's somewhere where you want people to live. The channel itself holds that content. The content can come in a lot of different forms. It could be text, it could be image. Video is so popular nowadays. Podcasts. The really big thing about this is that we don't confuse the purpose of the content with the purpose of the channel. So you might be trying to make someone laugh, you might be trying to educate someone. That's the purpose of the content. When we think of the channel here, we're thinking about the purpose is to have someone engage with your content on that channel. So some of the main publishing channels, these probably don't come as a surprise to you. Internally, you're looking at your websites, your blogs, white papers that you write, microsites that you build, maybe podcasts that you host. Externally, and this is where I really want to press the pause button, there's so many options nowadays. YouTube, Medium, guest blogging, LinkedIn, SlideShare, even Facebook is kind of verging on a publishing channel right now. And I think all too often brands really rely on their own owned media channels for distribution. When in reality, looking off-site can actually be one of the best ways to get your content in front of an audience you don't already have access to. At HubSpot, for example, we have a blog that has several millions of views each month. Instead of doubling down on resources there, however, we started a Medium channel. Reason being is our blog visitors know who we are, we attract them through search, we build that channel slowly, but Medium has a whole treasure trove of other people that we wouldn't normally be able to talk to. So when you're looking at your main publishing channels, really think about both sides of the coin. Another important thing to remember when you're thinking about publishing channels or channels where you want people to stay and really interact with your content is to make less work on yourself. I don't know about you guys, but like Inbar said, people don't want to do more work. So if you create a YouTube video, for example, don't just create the YouTube video and let it live there in solidarity. Take that and embed it on other similar channels, right? Put it on your website, put it on your blog. Moral being, just get more use out of the content you produce and the channels you're using. So let's talk goals, metrics, and best practices. Why would you be looking to use a publishing channel? Number one reason is to earn trust or build brand awareness. These are really, really top of the funnel channels when you think about a funnel first approach, like Inbar said. You want to earn trust, you want to build brand awareness, educate people, and really just attract initial traffic when you're looking at brand awareness channels. Engagement, of course, will happen. And when you see CTAs on blogs or newsletter signups on blogs, those are certainly a secondary thing for people to do, but it shouldn't be the first thing that draws someone to those channels. How you measure success with them? Time on page, SEO keyword ranking. How effectively are you pulling people to that channel? Traffic, where are the people coming from? What sources? And some best practices is just to optimize with on-page SEO, right? There's, unlike channels that go to find people, a lot of times when you own these channels, you have to help draw people in. So really following best practices around SEO, especially for mobile, will be what get people there. The second one, and we're going to go into this a lot more later, is promoting those publishing channels through your engagement channels. They can actually work together really effectively. Third, I can't stress this hard enough, but just test video. The amount of video that's being consumed on the web is just compounding on itself year over year. Like I said, create overlap. Don't just let one thing live in a silo by itself. Make sure you're doubling down on your channels. And then also mix your owned and earned. Don't just live on your website. Get out there and see where you can find audiences on other places. So our engagement channels. These, just as a publishing channel is a place where you want your users to interact with your content, an engagement channel is where you want your users or your visitors to take an action. They basically give people a place to interact or do something. They can serve as a distribution channel for your promotional content and your company. So we're talking about demos, things you're trying to serve up from your company to your audience. That's a really main use for these channels. And also, like I said, they can amplify publishing channels, which we'll go into a little bit more at the end. Main engagement channels that we like to focus on, again, these shouldn't be much of a surprise, but what's important to think about when you're thinking about engagement channels is that they're the ones that drive actions, likes, clicks, downloads, form completions. If you think of your publishing channels as a wave hello, then these are the next stage, right? These are the handshake. So when you consider which engagement channels you want to use, like Inbar said with content, start with the action first, and then refine by the stage of the funnel that you're going after. If we look at this kind of list as an example, let's say your goal is to drive demo requests. Any of these engagement channels could be used to do something like that, but not all of them meet the right funnel stage. If you just put tweets out there saying, try a demo now, even if you tell people what your company does, that's a big ask of a stranger. At the same time, if you were to go somewhere where, for example, a site that has user reviews and serve up PPC ads there for your company telling them to try a demo request, you're finding people who are already at the bottom of the funnel and are ready to make a sales-ready motion or a sales-ready action. So with these, again, it's all about action, stage of the funnel, and then refining down by who you're trying to talk to and which channel is most likely to reach them. Goals, metrics, and best practices for these channels. So why would you use an engagement channel? First off, just to get audiences to share with each other. Virality is a really, really powerful tool when it comes to sharing content, especially on social media. I think that's a really big goal that people often overlook with these channels. Eliciting a conversation, especially when you look at kind of less conventional engagement channels like Quora, Reddit, places like that where people can actually engage and talk back and forth. When you think about that. And of course, the main reason that you'd use an engagement channel is to perform an action, get people to download a white paper, get them to sign up for a demo, get them to learn more, things like that. So when we look at best practices, we look at how effectively did we convert people and how many conversions did we get, right? It's clicks and it's click-through rates. It's cost per action or cost per click and then raw conversions. It's really just how effective are we at getting people to take those actions. Some best practices around engagement channels, like I said, matching them to the stage of the funnel. Inbar actually mentioned this too, but targeting and retargeting, right? If you are first serving up someone an ebook at the top of the funnel via Twitter, that's a great top of the funnel engagement channel use. If that person comes to your site, downloads that, and you now know who they are, maybe now is a good time to serve up another ad using using retargeting that pushes them further down the funnel. So you can slowly move people along the stage with those. Like Inbar said also, being explicit. People don't know what you want them to do always unless you tell them. So if you want them to fill out a demo, if you want them to tag a friend on a Facebook post, let them know. Last but not least is just A/B testing. One of the most powerful things about social media is that it gives people the opportunity to A/B test. Or not social media alone, but also like any form of paid, really this is where that lives. One thing I do want to note is that crossover is way more common than normal. So you might be thinking, wait, my blog is an engagement channel. I have a CTA at the bottom of it. Or you might be thinking, wait, Facebook is a publishing channel. Look, I'm hosting a video there. People are staying on Facebook and watching this. And I think that that's okay. We're going to see more of this crossover as we move forward. But the point that I would urge you is just to think about the primary use of that channel. So this blog is great for converting someone, but our primary goal should be to educate them, inform them, and use the channel for its primary purpose. Facebook, same thing. I think it goes back and forth a little bit more here, but really to think what is the purpose of, what am I trying to do with my content, and using that to decide first versus looking at the platform, what it's best for. So there's a lot of channels out there, and I think that once you understand your purpose, sometimes you still have a lot of options, which is where understanding your audience and how they interact comes into the picture. Quite simply, you just have to ask yourself a lot of questions to understand who you're trying to talk to and how they engage. Most importantly is just demographic data. I think you can understand a lot about who you're talking to just by knowing age, location, things like that. For example, if you're trying to target someone on social media and you know your average age is 50 plus, you're probably not going to do very well with an Instagram ad or something on Twitter. Likewise, if you're looking to target millennials or even young professionals, Instagram can be much more popular. How do they engage? Another really important question. If you're trying to target, a C-suite person who's running from meeting to meeting all day, they probably don't have time to read a 20-page report. Instead, they might like a 2-minute video that gives them high-level stats. Or if you're trying to influence someone who's trying to sell up to a decision maker, maybe they want a report that makes them seem smarter and they want it via LinkedIn. So really put yourself in their shoes, understand what their goal is and how you can tailor that content to them. Some other things I listed here, and again, there's no right or wrong answers here. There's a lot of things to consider. It's just what do they find credible? When are they online? Really start thinking about how they consume content and where, and then match them at those places and at those times. So just to draw out 2 examples, I'm going to talk about kind of 2 completely different personas that 2 companies might be trying to target. The first company is a B2B company that sells machinery to landscapers. So their persona is Landscaper Larry, very creative name. Larry is on the move all day. He's very busy. He's entrenched in his business. So you know what? Sending Larry to an ebook probably wouldn't work very well. He doesn't really have a ton of time. He's probably not going to be engaging in that sense if you want to have him on a publishing channel. But the publishing channel he might interact better with is a podcast. He can listen to it while he's on the go. He can use it anytime he finds most convenient. Likewise, with engagement channels, he's probably not, hanging out on too many sites other than business sites, right? So trying to meet him where he is with a PPC ad on an industry site is probably a much better match for Larry. When he does have spare time, maybe you try some Facebook ads because his demographic data fits in well to Facebook users. On the other hand, think of a company who's targeting chief security officers. They want to talk to security Scott. Scott does not trust forms. Let's just think about it that way. So if people want to engage Scott on a publishing channel, they want him to, read something in depth, like an ebook, they probably don't want to send him to a gated form because he's not going to put his information in. They might want to engage him on a LinkedIn post or something that's more public facing like that, so they can gain his trust a little bit before they try and hit him with a CTA at the bottom of the post, something like that. Likewise, he probably puts more faith in customer reviews or even like Reddit, somewhere where you can talk to other professionals in the space. So this is the way we kind of go through thinking about refining down the channels, first by purpose and then by audience. Last but not least, and then we'll get to some questions at the end, is just mapping out a distribution plan. This is really where the rubber meets the road. How do you take your publishing channels, your engagement channels, and make sure that you're doing the right balance? The first place I want to focus here is when you're pairing publishing and engagement. So like I said, published content and publishing channels can be optimized for SEO. A blog can be found on its own. We certainly have seen that at HubSpot. We understand that story, but sometimes you want a little bit of a boost. So what we recommend is actually pairing engagement channels with your content. And there's a few easy ways to do that, right? If you write an ebook, that's a really long published piece of content. You could break out those chapters, write blog posts, and then for each of those blog posts, have 4 Facebook posts to promote it. And there you begin to see you can create actually a web of content, starting with your publishing channels, pushing out to other publishing channels, and then eventually driving to those with engagement channels. To illustrate that, this is just a sample, really dumbed down version of a distribution plan that you do. You could see that you start with something primary. What is like your meaty content that you put all of your time and effort into? The hours behind creating this for your company is probably a lot higher. There's probably 20 plus hours in creating that ebook. Those blog posts are probably 5 hours each in creating. So you can do a few of those. And then your engagement channels probably take 2 minutes to create, if that. So you can see that you start to use more, or you start to use less and less of your time to create more and more volume in channels pushing to other channels. And you can begin to create a web that makes sure that you get the most out of that content you've created. Just a quick word of caution, I guess, when you're pairing publishing and engagement channels is just to be conscious of consistency, format, the audience that you're speaking to with both. Nothing's more frustrating than clicking on a misleading ad or engaging with a Facebook post that has someone else reply to you with a sales pitch or something like that. You really want to make sure you're being consistent when you're taking people from channel to channel. And then last but not least is just the fact that sometimes engagement channels, you want to also map out what you want them to do, but it doesn't have to always push to a publishing channel. It can push directly to an action. And again, those should match with the stage of the funnel and the audience that you're trying to speak to. So starting a trial or a tutorial, probably not good for a Twitter campaign, but maybe you use email promotion to a group of people who have been engaging with your newsletter for the last 6 months, and they're showing that they have a higher open or click rate, things like that. So the real kind of takeaway here is to make sure you're mapping that out and having it not be an afterthought. So often people publish something first and then think, oh, this isn't getting enough traction. How do we go back? How do we get more people to it? When in reality, right from the get-go, you should be thinking, I'm putting time and effort into something, or this action really matters to me. How do I get the most amount of people there? So with that, I'm going to pop it over and see if we have any questions, just to make sure you guys know how the question pane works. If you're watching from the landing page, you can actually hop into YouTube, and there's a question bar on the side, and we can start it from there. I know, Inbar, I have questions for you if no one from the audience pops.
Yeah. I've actually got a couple questions for you as well. My big thing is when you're talking about distribution channels, like there's new stuff popping up all the time, and I just wonder how do you evaluate a new channel and understand whether it's worth your time or not?
Sure. That's a great question. You see things all the time. Snapchat's super hot right now. Brands are questioning, do I get on that? Do I not? And the question, the way I would think about it, and it really goes back to the same thing, is just, does it meet your purpose, and is your audience there? And if your audience isn't there yet, will they be? So I think, again, it comes down to the same line of questioning as channels that have been around for 20 plus years. Don't do it because it's the hot new thing. Don't do it because it's just out there. Don't do it because you think maybe people will be there. Understand that when you choose to pursue a new channel or not, is it where your audience are going to be, and can you measure success on it? I think I would flip a similar question around on you, talking about kind of big popular new things. Do you see any trends coming down the line with content? I know that's always a big topic for people.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the big thing, and I really, there's a reason I emphasize this in my presentation, is quizzes. And in general, interactive content. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of video happening as well. Everybody's kind of jumping into that. But something that I really think is paying off in spades for people doing any sort of performance, measuring towards any sort of goal, really, that interactive kind of aspect to it tends to do really, really well. Another thing I've seen kind of pop up in the tech industry is people are loving drones. It's become huge, but I would caution against doing too much around stuff that's not really in your in your wheelhouse. If you're a company doing, like, let's say, servers, online storage, I don't know if drones are really what you should be writing about, right? Write about online storage. But yeah, the tech companies are loving drones right now. But if I were to encourage anybody, really, in terms of what they're going to create, if you're going to put time and resource behind something, try to make it interactive. It's just a really great way to keep people's attention. So I actually have another one for you, if you don't mind. I look at our Taboola as a channel is very much both B2B and B2C, and so I see kind of a little bit of everything. And I was wondering, how would you differentiate between what a good, like, B2B distribution channel is versus B2C?
It's a great question. I think it comes down to a lot of things. One of those being what KPIs you're trying to hit, which I actually have a question about you about those after this, so we'll save that. But yeah, I think it's, what are your goals? When you're a B2C company, a lot of your goals don't involve quite as long of a sales process. So you don't need as much of those kind of tofu, mofu, bofu things, so much as you might just need an initial trigger reaction to get someone over to a shopping cart. Or versus a B2B company, a lot of times there's a lot more nurturing involved there. I think that's one of the big things you see is B2B companies struggle a little bit with building brand awareness, more so than B2C companies. That's true. So I think that's one of the big things. Outside of that, I think that with B2B, there's different strategies, just little gamification things that work better. Not that retargeting is gamification. When you're a B2B company, you have a lot more data to work with. Think about shopping cart abandonment. Like, that's a whole tool that B2B companies don't have. They might have someone who's visited a pricing page or something like that, but they really don't have that scope of, like, content to serve up just based on the data that their own website is creating. I know that you mentioned KPIs, so I think I'm going to fit in one more and then give people time to run to their next meetings if they have them. But, like, what matters most? Content. What KPIs should we be looking at? There's a lot out there. I know you said it's hard to measure. I'm putting you on the spot. What counts?
You know what? In all honesty, I think that the best possible thing you can do is measure a really concrete action. I often find that people who come in with really murky goals just don't. The scale is just never there. You can say, oh, well, I want brand awareness, but you want to put an actual action behind brand awareness. Is it page views? I'm actually not a big fan of bounce rates. The problem with bounce rate as a metric is that, if you don't have enough links on the page, people might not stick around. But time on site, video view completions, if you have great article recommendations at the bottom, clicking on that article recommendation, that's a great KPI. I find the things that find the most scale and that marketers can really put some decent spend behind are app downloads. Goals in general, like signing up, leaving your information, are an amazing way to get really good scale, really cost efficient. And so I really find that, it's always a good go-to, especially in the B2B space.
Cool. Well, thank you, Inbar, so much. Can't thank you and for teaming up with us on this. I could talk content with you all day, but I know other people probably have things to run to. So thank you all for tuning in. Really appreciate it. We'll be sending this out on demand, and we look forward to the next webinar with you guys. Have an awesome day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.